Um, and that I found to be the biggest thing was that Lisa came super prepared. She knew her lines, and she expected from me and everyone else ultra professionalism. But we brought our P's and Q's, and I loved it. It challenged me. I mean, I was nervous. I had never worked with people with that kind of experience, and I knew I needed to bring my A game.
What's going on, everybody? Rob Mabry here, writer, director, and producer of The Legend of El Chupacabra. That's a feature comedy film available on Amazon, Tubi, and Apple TV. I am the host of Texas Indie Film, the podcast, and with me today is Colin Bressler of Bressler Productions. Colin, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Really excited that you're going to be highlighting and focusing on Texas indie film, which is such a vibrant, incredible community.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Let's get right into it. Why don't you tell me a bit about the Colin Bressler origin story? How did you get into filmmaking?
So my origin story is I was super lucky to be raised by people that love film, and my parents had an extensive movie collection, and they had a wall of VHS tapes back in the day, and I would watch all these movies ranging from 2001: A Space Odyssey to The Godfather, Mean Streets, all these kind of amazing films. And I would go to the movies all the time, and my parents, my grandparent, we would just talk about movies all the time, and it got on my radar. And it wasn't till about sophomore year in high school where I was like, maybe I should do this as a career. And I then discovered the idea of film school. And I was like, I want to go to film school, And I went, at the end of high school, I luckily got into an awesome film school in New York called the School of Visual Arts. And that was it. That kind of set me off on direction of being a filmmaker.
Yeah, so I had a very similar experience as a kid. My parents recording the movies on VHS. They were like 6-hour VHS. Usually there was like three movies, on those, and the labels, and my parents would write the films, and so yeah, that's how I absorbed a lot of films myself. So definitely can relate to that experience. Um, so you went to film school, like what were you could do a lot of things, right, in the film industry. So I'm curious, kind of what were you thinking about in terms of your career path in film, and did it turn out the way that you expected it to?
Yeah, I mean, back then, for me, I really didn't know anything about beyond what a director was sort of metaphorically. I didn't even really know what a director did, but I understood it was like a head position on a film set. So I wanted to be a director. I had made films all the way going back to eighth grade, but they were like ridiculously stupid, idiotic films. But I always wrote stories. I love telling stories. It wasn't until film school where I was like, oh, okay, so I see, like, there's positions, and like the director does this and director does. And then in my freshman year of film school, we got a project where the professor of the class broke us up into groups, and basically we had each position, and I just sort of, I don't remember if I volunteered or whatever, but I became the DP on that little specific shoot. And it was like a party scene and everything, and I lit it, and I had so much fun, and I enjoyed it so much that I kind of just, it was an almost instantaneous, like, okay, I think I'm a cinematographer. I think that's what I want to do. And from that point on, I mean, that's kind of what I obsessively studied cinematography, and kind of left the idea of directing behind. And every class project, every thing we did, I was the DP guy. And I shot everybody else's movies, and I would study cinematography, and that kind of set me off in motion, to become a cinematographer.
Gotcha. um, so I know that you're a writer, right? kind of an auteur, writer, director on your projects, and I've seen that there are projects that you've written solo, some that you've done with a co-writer. Tell me a little bit about your writing process. Like, how do you take an idea to a fully fleshed out script?
Yeah, so so I've been writing screenplays all the way back, probably 10th or 11th grade in high school, like proper screenplays. And so for me, I generally create so the idea comes, a generalized idea, right? And then what I do is I break down into a timeline the major plot points and story points. Like, character A does X, character A does B, character A does the next thing, And so once I've kind of gotten it broken down into this sort of timeline, I can see the movie for myself. I could see it from a bigger picture as this whole thing and all the plot points and all the things. And then from there, I can kind of move around scenes if I feel like that plot point should have happened earlier or that plot point should happen earlier or later, right? And so at
So,
that
so do you? Sorry,
no, no,
curious.
no, no.
Do you? Do you write an outline? Are you a note cards guy? Like, how do you? Because as a writer, you can get lost, right, in your film if you don't have the right structure. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what techniques do you use to map out the plot of your film?
Yeah, definitely outline. Big time outline guy. I will just be number one, two, three, four, five, and it's just scene by scene. First, I write a treatment. Treatment's basically just going to be the overall story concept. Then after the treatment, then I break the treatment down into an outline. But the way I outline is I go scene by scene. Literally, one will be the opening scene, two will be the second scene, three will be the third, that kind of thing. And in that outline, it'll just say, let's say scene one will say Mary goes shopping and meets Sally. You know what I mean? And it's like that. And then I go all the way through scene one to scene 90, whatever, however many scenes there are. So at that point, I've written this script, the story in a treatment form, which is a paragraph form. Now I've written the story in a breakdown outline form. So then when I get to screenwriting, the actual screenwriting process, I've already done it twice. Now it's like the execution of dialogue is really all that's left at that stage, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I know the generalized story. Now, the second outline, now I know the specific details of the story. And the third thing is now, well, I need to, what do they say to each other? And then what do they do, the minutia of each scene? And I find it helps me make the process faster. Because to be honest, once I've done that outline, the screenwriting becomes pretty simple, pretty quick for me. Um, you know, outside of just sort of dialogue tweaking. You know what I mean? And then so that yeah, and then at the end of that process, I'll have a first draft done, and then it's really just after that, just tweak until you get it kind of perfected.
Yeah, I gotcha. So, as an indie filmmaker, when you're writing or when you're developing a project, um, how much are you sort of prescribing to that write what you have, concept, right, for indie filmmakers to keep that budget low, use your available resources? Is that something you're taking a lot of, consideration into, or are you, is it just like, hey, I have an idea and I'm going to figure out how to make this happen?
Oh, 100%. No, yeah, it's a great question, great point. Yeah, I take it into account every aspect of it. And the people I've written with, which is Josh Kaza, Ronald Mercado, they know they could talk to that very much because I will tell them like, hey, like slow down. You wrote that scene you wrote way too big for what I'm going to be shooting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I take it into account majorly. How many locations am I going to be shooting? Every scene I think of, um, I will scale back if I'm like, oh wow, that's too much, or I can't get an airplane hangar. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's a massive thing because for someone working at the budget I work at, and and knowing that I'm going to film this, I have to be very aware of how many locations am I writing in here, how many characters am I writing, because every character is an actor, every actor gets paid. You know what I mean? Every location's a location. Every location means time, and how do we get those so you have to, for someone like me, absolutely 100%. I'm obsessively thinking about it. I would love to be able to just fully imagine whatever I wanted to, but being straightforward, no, of course. I mean, at this stage, now I have written scripts in the past. See, I fundamentally separate, right? So I will write a script idea that I come to me, and that's a script that maybe I'll sell, put into festivals to sell that idea, and then there's the scripts I write that are shooting scripts that I'm going to film. So they're like two separate things for me.
Gotcha. So, in our kind of pre-interview work, you were pretty open about some mental health challenges that you've had in the past, and I know that that has influenced the work, that you've done on film. Can you just talk a little bit about, those challenges and how it, has influenced your filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every aspect of us as filmmakers, you and me, and any filmmaker watching, I mean, our life experiences are going to play a role in our movies, in this, especially if we're writers. And so I suffer from anxiety, OCD, and I have adult ADHD, ADD. So those are two sort of conflicting things. I've done a lot of work to kind of build my life and not let those things sort of like bring me down or whatever you want to say. But as far as like film, to be honest, in my darkest times, being on film sets have always been like my safe place, my happy place. So I've been doing this since I was 20. And so when I remember many times especially when I was younger, really suffering from anxiety, OCD, I remember being on dollies or sitting on set and feeling like it was the only place I was comfortable in the world. Um, because if when with stuff like that, when your mind is focused on your art, it helps you kind of move on from those feelings and ideas that are rough, flying around your head. Um, and I was undiagnosed in these things until my 40s. So I just didn't know what was wrong with me. But my parents instilled a belief in me that was you just keep pushing. You never give up, keep pushing, and so even at a young age, I never let it stop me. It made it really difficult and it was a hard road. Um, but I was always like, I just got to keep going. I knew I wanted to be in the film industry. I was like, nothing's going to stop me from reaching my goals. But I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there was many dark and many really difficult times. But I always had this instinct for. I kind of was like, I know if I keep going, there's daylight on the other end. There's something like I just had this belief that like if I push and push and push, that better days will come, and they have. I've gotten so much better. I've gotten help with therapy and stuff like that. So I'm doing a ton better, and it's been a great journey. And I think in terms of like filmmaking, I think I tend to want to sort of like write in not necessarily happy ending, but I have a view of life on a very minute level that I'm I think like I've kind of recognized in some of my stuff that like I tend to sort of really feel very passionate about even I'm minutia of like positivity or happiness, because when you suffer from these kind of things like depression, anxiety, you really latch onto any kind of positive moment and you live in that positive moment. And so I think some of my films I've recognized that like they may come off as dark in some ways, but I think it's because I view more that the beauty of the minutia of life through the lens of how glorious it is to just simply sometimes have an hour of peace of mind over a day of it, you know. So I don't know if that made any sense, but you know that is how I feel. So
It was complete nonsense, Colin.
thank you. Yeah.
Now, I appreciate you, sharing something personal like that. So
Of
thank
course,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about your films, and I've seen a couple. I wanted to talk about the Mummy Murders, and maybe you can help the audience understand sort of what it's about. But kind of at its core, it's a conversation between a journalist and a serial killer, and that serial killer is in a way, confessing his crimes. But yeah, tell us about the film and the inspiration for it.
Yeah, so that film, so I at the time, I had a student, I do mentorship program for a film school called the Film Connection in Los Angeles, but it's an online program. And I had a student named Will Donahue, who right away I recognized had immense writing talent. He would share stuff with me, and I was like, wow, this guy's amazing. At the same time, I had seen a movie called Lansky, which is starring Harvey Keitel, and it's about Meyer Lansky, which was a mafia don. You know, he was part of a major mafia figure. Anyway, the movie was just simply this journalist meets Meyer Lansky, and at like a diner in Florida somewhere, and they Meyer Lansky told his story. So I'm watching this movie, and I've seen a lot of like movies, documentaries where they interview serial killers, and so I kind of was like, well, what if you merge the two ideas and what if a serial killer were to kind of be stalking a journalist and find a moment to sort of grab her in a safe space where he knew he was safe and tell her his life story. So that was sort of the genesis. And then I told it to Will Donahue as I saw it, I was like, I think he would be amazing to help write this. And he loved it and he ran with it and really brought it to life. He did an incredible job, particularly bringing Joe, the serial killer, played by Jason Scarborough, an amazing actor in San Antonio. And he really brought Joe to life on the page, and then Jason Scarborough brought Joe to life on screen. And so that was kind of the genesis, honestly. I mean, just kind of like seeing that Lansky film, thinking about the idea. I do a lot of what ifs when I make a film. What if this happened? What if that happened? And so, yeah, it was, that happened. I brought it to Will, and Will was like, yeah, let's run with this. Will wrote an awesome script. I did some, I tweaked it with them, and then we put it on film, and it's on Tubi and Amazon Prime, and it's actually doing really well, um, and we're really proud of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely go check it out. A couple of things that struck me. One, and I don't know if there was actually any influence or not, but the conversations to me reminded me of Silence of the Lambs and the sort of Clarice and Hannibal Lecter, in his asylum or prison, and the conversations that they had. So anyway, that was just one thing that struck
Absolutely.
me. Yeah, and
Huge influence.
okay, cool. And the other thing, uh, you know, obviously, having a bulk of the film, happening in one place, right? Like that is a way to keep the budget down for
Yep.
us indie filmmakers. But it also presents the challenge of keeping it fresh and keeping the tension. And so I'm curious, what were you thinking, as a director, as a DP, like how do you just keep the tension, in place when you're, kind of stuck in one location for the bulk of the film?
Yeah, so like it's a great question. So a lot of the film obviously happens in a cafe. The journalist is at a cafe, and Joe, the serial killer, shows up at her table. She doesn't understand who he is at first, and then obviously he explains who he is. As far as the tension, yeah, I mean that was a huge challenge for me going into it because, as you said, you're this is great. This is going to keep the budget low. We shot 3 days there. But I'm like, okay, that's great, but how do we keep people interested? So it was a twofold proposition. So one was, how do we keep people interested in the cafe itself? And then secondarily, I understood that I was like, we have to have cutaways. We have to have something to show. So that's why we show a lot of Joe's story as he's telling it. We show flashbacks of his childhood. We show flashbacks of his adolescent period, and we show flashbacks of his adult period. So it really is the movie itself is kind of like a life story, a biography of a serial killer. And so that was one not trick, but that was one element to sort of like build upon the tension in the area was to show flashbacks as he was talking and telling the story to show what he's talking about. The second one was the interior of the cafe itself. So I wanted to I had two elements. There's two people sitting at a table, so you're kind of locked in. So as the story went on, I through framing, I tried to show the power dynamic of Joe was always center of frame, kind of a predominant power in his shot. Joe is lit kind of from behind, so his face is a little shadowed to create a little bit more mystery in his face and a little bit more shadow, kind of more sinister quality to him. And Alexis, the reporter, she was more kind of classically lit, kind of light window light coming in from the side, soft, light coming in, kind of half of her face, a little bit more than half her face, kind of three quarters face, soft kind of window light coming in. So and then structurally for her shots, we were composing her kind of off frame, where her face would inhabit an area of the frame off to the side, kind of creating like a feeling of something unease in her that she's off kilter, she's not in control. As the story goes on and that dynamic shifts, Joe does actually start to go off frame and they both of their framing sort of like change as the story goes on, showing that sort of power dynamic has changed, the story has shifted, and who's in control and who's not in control. So that was really the main, focus. We kept. I wanted the cafe to be dark. I found a cafe that had the perfect feel to it. It was a rustic cafe with the walls were kind of had wood, a lot of wood grains and stuff, as opposed to a brightly lit, fluorescent lit, top lit kind of place. I could make it kind of sculpt it, make more shadows, make it a little bit more mysterious in there, and but also at the same time make it mysterious and more kind of intense lighting, but not to where it's like, oh, this is like what I've never seen a cafe look like that. And I just didn't want to
Yeah.
make it look unrealistic. And that was huge in location scouting because when we found that cafe, I knew I was like, this is the perfect place because it won't look manufactured. It'll look realistic, but still create that feeling of shadows and contrast.
Cool. Hey, let's talk about your most recently released film, Into the Gravel Pit. Um, Stories about a group of friends, three friends, who maybe feel their friendship is a little disconnected. They want to have one kind of last hurrah, and they get a hold of this sort of new, I guess, experimental drug, and things do not go well. So, tell us a little more about the film and the experience of making that film.
Yeah, so my latest film playing over my shoulder here is Into the Gravel Pit, produced by myself and Christy Crandall, who's an amazing San Antonio-based filmmaker, and was co-written with Ronald Mercado. The genesis of that was kind of similar to Mummy Murders in that I love YouTube. Watching YouTube, I saw a video about these people doing, like you said, an experimental kind of strange street drug, and doing the street drug, making people do crazy, 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 scary, violent things. And I was like, huh, it's an interesting idea. Sort of like a zombie ish type vibe within the context of a drug thing. So I wrote the first draft, same process we talked about earlier. And I wrote the first draft, and I was kind of like, I just felt it wasn't working. And I had, I had read scripts by Ronald Mercado before, and I really liked his vibe in his writing process. So I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, would you be interested in collaborating on this?" I sent it to him, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah." So we met, and he brought incredible stuff to the table. He wrote the second draft and beyond, and we got into shooting script prepared, and we went along and shot it. And Christy came aboard and really galvanized it. And it's an odd film. It's horror, but it's more gore, sort of gore suspense thriller. Um, I don't know. I don't really try to like think of genre when I make these films. I mean, I want to stay close to the horror genre, but I don't feel so tethered to do exactly certain things. I just kind of gravitate to ideas and what I think is interesting. So, um, the big thing in this film was so we got there. It's three young friends, so we got incredible casts. We got Michael Dawkins. Over there is Riley Rodriguez and Samantha Elise, and the three of them were playing the main characters, the main three friends that decide to go on this drug trip. Um, but there was another side to the story, which is a story that follows these two older parents. That daughter is terminal and is coming home to live with them in sort of hospice situation as she spends the last few months of her life. So those two characters was like Christy and I were like, well, maybe we can find some horror names, people with followings in the horror world to play it. So horror, Christy had a lot of connections, so we reached out to Paul T. Taylor and the great, great, great Lisa Wilcox from Nightmare on Elm Street. And luckily, they came on board, and we filmed these two sections very separately, and we filmed the young people's stories first, and then months later we filmed Lisa and Paul's and Bobby. Bobby Ragsdale played their daughter, and we filmed those at the end. That was the last shoots we did, and they were incredible. And they've been since the film's online on Tubi, Amazon Prime, and a bunch of other places. It's doing really well as well, and that one carries the weight of having these name actors in it, which is really the first time I've ever done that, and it really has changed the game. I mean, Lisa Wilcox particularly brings such a brand to the film that people are interested in general. Oh, Lisa Wilcox! Oh my God, she's amazing. So that was the first time I ever done that, and it's so incredible.
Yeah, I was wondering about that decision because it's certainly, advice that is given to indie filmmakers that, if you want to make money with your film, right, you've got to have, a known actor, in the cast. And I think, I mean, even for me, like I've only made one feature film, but I think for me, there's like a reluctance, to go forward and and try to find somebody who's really established. Um, so I'm curious as to like what the experience was like on set, and was it much different, than working with local actors? And then, I think you mentioned, that it's helped the film, but like, what has been the impact of having a known actor or two as part of the cast?
So, main thing is that Paul and Lisa and Bobby are professional full-time actors, right? So is Riley Rodriguez, Samantha, Elise, and Michael Dawkins. Um, and the big deal about that is a lot of actors in San Antonio are awesome, but they carry the weight of, just like you and I do to some degree. They carry the weight of having other things to preoccupy our time. For instance, a full time job or a part time job, whatever it is. And so when you get someone like Lisa Wilcox, if she signs on, her agent signs on, that's her job. Into the Gravel Pit was her job for the days she was there. And I remember about halfway through the day, we worked with her for a day and a half. The first day, I remember halfway through the day, I was like looking at her and I was like, man, I think she hates me and I think she hates being here. And I went to Christy, who knows her, and I said, yeah, is she all right? I mean, and Christy goes, no, no, she's in character. She's working. She's focused. And I was like, oh, okay. And I realized, it's a dark role. And she was in it. And there's just a difference. It's not that San Antonio actors aren't good or anything like that. It's just that it's the reality of, if you're doing it professionally full time and that's it, there is going to be a difference than someone who's doing it part time or really in a hobby sense. And that I found to be the biggest thing, was that Lisa came super prepared. She knew her lines, and she expected from me and everyone else ultra professionalism. She wasn't rude. She was actually incredibly nice and respectful, but we were that way with her. I think that if we had showed up unprepared, or we were laughing and joke around on set or doing stupid things, I think she would have been probably called us out. But
Yeah.
we brought our P's and Q's, and I loved it. It challenged me. I mean, I was nervous. I had never worked with people with that kind of experience, and I knew I needed to bring my A game. And it helped me learn too, and I think it made me a better director for next projects, because I went, okay, like, this is how you need to act around actors like this, and they need to know their blocking, and they need to be, you need to be ready to describe all these things to them and ready for their questions. It was really cool. And then, as far as the back end, I strongly recommend it to anyone who has the resources to find a couple thousand here and there to pay for an actor for a day or two. I would say, the next time you do a film, that maybe you or then someone else, is that, think of a smallish role, but that has carries weight to your story, that you think, okay, I can maybe grab 2 to 3 thousand and find somebody that I can fly into San Antonio, or that lives here already, whatever, that carries weight with them, because it is a huge deal, because you're going to do your promotion. But if you could do your promotion with someone like Lisa Wilcox attached to it, then it just makes it so much better. So I go on, as I'm sure you do. I'm a member of, like, I don't know, 50 horror film groups on Facebook, and I go on all these groups once a week, twice a week, and I do a blurb. Lisa Wilcox starring in the new indie film Into the Gravel Pit. Check it out. Or I asked Lisa recently to, hey, Lisa, can I interview you like you're doing with me? I said, Lisa, can I interview you for the DVD extras for the movie? And I interviewed her for 30 minutes, and we're putting it on the DVD extras, but I took a 2 minute snippet, put it on YouTube, and then I posted it on all those horror sites to just, I don't know, maybe 50 people on those horror Facebook groups will then go watch the film. So it's massive, because if you can afford it, and I mean, like I said, I've only been able to afford it once. If you can, it's amazing. If not, it's fine. You just got to do your grassroots and push your film. Like The Mummy Murders doesn't have anyone like of that notoriety, but it's doing really well as well. I mean, I would say, and your film, Legend of El Chupacabra. I mean, it's also advice wise in that is that you chose something with a famous story. So that's like having a famous actor because people will gravitate and go, "Oh, Chupacabra, I know about that. Oh, that's cool," and they'll click. Bigfoot, you know what I mean? Click. So it's those kind of things.
Yep, yep, makes sense. Um, so let's talk a little bit about distribution. Um, are you? I know that you've worked with distributors. I don't know if you've done self distribution, but what is your strategy for distribution, and what advice might you have for your fellow filmmakers in terms of getting your film out there for an audience to see?
So I have done self distribution and I've done, well, I'm not sure. I've done aggregators like Film Hub and I've done distributors like Buffalo 8 and Gravitas Ventures. So Into the Gravel Pit was picked up by Buffalo 8. The Mummy Murders was distributed by Gravitas Ventures. I have other movies that are like No Promised Land and Bloody Drama, movies like that have been pushed through aggregators like Film Hub. The difference I find is that you have to. So with Into the Gravel Pit, because we had Lisa Wilcox, we could have probably gone to Film Hub or an aggregate, right? Because with her name, we probably that alone gives us a lot of clout, right? And that really the question you first have up front is when you go to a distributor like Gravitas Ventures or Buffalo 8, understand that they're going to share profits and they're going to charge you a back end cost of their the way they're going to promote the film. So usually with those two, I have found it's about $6,000 to $8,000. What that means is that once you don't pay them 6,000 to 8,000, that just means that your film, when it goes on these platforms, that they're going to extract 6,000 to 8,000 off of what your film makes off the top. That's like their take. Then
Yeah,
after that, they're still going to take 20 to 25% of every dollar you earn on your film. Now, what do you get from it is they have brands that especially I have found with Gravitas Ventures. Gravitas Ventures has a brand where people know of their films. So I've had people reach out to me that have been like, "Oh, I love Gravitas Ventures movies. I saw that your film's on there." Stuff like that. But you have to weigh, is that value enough, right? So I have two movies in post production right now. They're both kind of grindhouse ish films. I'm not going to give them to distributors. I'm going to go to aggregates for those because I don't think that they're going to get enough out of a Gravitas Ventures type place that I don't think it warrants me giving them that initial $8,000 or $6,000. So I'd rather go to Film Hub and distribute it through a place where I'm just simply sharing 80-20 with them. They get 20%, I get 80% of every dollar, and that's it. And so the other thing I like a lot about Film Hub with the other films I have, particularly not No Promised Land's my big one on Film Hub, is I can look and go to their site and literally day to day look at how the films are doing, how the film's
yeah,
doing. In the case of No Promised Land, is I can look and I can see how's it doing on Tubi, how's it doing on Amazon Prime. Particularly Tubi's the big one for No Promised Land, so I can watch that and I can tell, okay, I need to promote it more in the Tubi space, so I do that. So it gives you that when you go to Gravitas Ventures or Into the Gravel Pit, they for lack of a better term, they hold your hand a little bit more and they help guide you through the process and tell you, we want you to focus on here, Instagram, social media accounts, hit Tubi, and they give you that. They
Yeah.
only tell you quarterly how much your movie made, and they give you a breakdown of everywhere your movie made money. So you'll see Verizon Wireless, I made $7 of Verizon Wireless. Amazon Prime, I made 150. So they'll break that down, and that's quarterly. Every 3 months, you'll get you'll get a paycheck also, but you'll get a breakdown from those kind of companies telling you where you made your money and the share that you get of that money. And in the case of Mummy Murders, I got the first one I ever got. Mummy Murders made $11,000 on the first quarter. Right, and that was our
Wow.
big push. Right, but like I said, Gravitas Ventures took 8,500 of that. So that's what you have to understand going into it. I'm not saying it's a negative because I don't
Yeah.
think Mummy Murders would have made 11,000 without Gravitas Ventures. So it's just kind of like you have to balance these things out and and figure out what you think. Like I said, I have two grindhouse kind of movies coming out in the next 6 months or so, both of which are going to be going on to Tubi, but they're going to be going on through an aggregate like Film Hub.
Gotcha. So, really appreciate that insight around distribution. Um, for filmmakers who might be out there, ready to take the step and make their first feature film, what's your, kind of one piece of advice that you want to offer?
First feature film, wow. I would say don't make a feature film first. If from your question, assuming the person has made a short, let's assume they've made shorts because you
Yeah,
the reason.
let's assume that, because that's good advice, and that's not
Yeah,
to say, like, I know a successful filmmaker who, like, the first thing he did was make a feature film. That is not the path that I would recommend. I would say start small, make some short films, and once you feel like you've really kind of honed your craft, then consider making a feature. But that's my advice. What's yours?
absolutely. You have to. This is a craft. This is art. Like any art, you don't go to a canvas without ever learning how to paint and just start doing painting. And no one would, right? Same thing with filmmaking. I would say first feature out if you do not have a background in either editing or cinematography, find someone on the cheap if you can, but find someone, a friend who has that background, who understands how cameras work and lighting work, or who understand how editing works. Those two things are going to be the deal breaker in the whole process because as much as sound is the probably the most important thing. Your first feature, my first feature was terrible, right? Awful. But you're talking about a guy that by the time I made my first feature, I made my first feature around 2012. I had been working in the film industry since 1998. So that's 14 years. And my first feature is awful. Like unwatchably stupid and bad, right? But I'm a guy I had shot as a cinematographer multiple feature films. So I knew what a feature film schedule's like. I knew what a feature film set's like. I knew as a cinematographer how a light a set for scene after scene and continuity of lighting and continuity of concept, right? Because these are all things. A short film about a guy in a bedroom, there's no continuity of lighting, there's no continuity of style. He's in a bedroom, that's the whole movie, right? So you light that bedroom once, story takes place, end story. In a feature film, you're having scene by scene, story by story, hour by hour. You have to think, all right, well, what is the lighting concept for this whole movie? What is the style? What is the visual imprint? So you want to make sure that if you're going into it for the first time, give yourself a shot by having a craftsperson like a cinematographer, or if you feel good about doing that yourself, then find an editor that knows how to put together scenes and cut reverse shot reverse shot cutting, and how to make a scene work, but still assume it's going to be bad. I really, you know, um, I swear I don't think I can't think of a filmmaker, and I'm talking about Hollywood. I can't think of a filmmaker who likes their first movie. I'll give you an example. Stanley Kubrick hates his first movie. His family, in his will, he can't show it. That film doesn't exist. That's how much he hates it. Martin Scorsese doesn't like it. You know what I mean? You go on and on and on.
Hey, Colin, I like my first movie. The
Yes,
Legend of El Chupacabra, available on Tubi, Amazon, and Apple TV.
you have broken the code.
But yeah, well, I mean, I made 20 probably short films, so, some that were, 30 minutes in length
Yeah.
before I decided, like, okay, I think I've learned enough, to make a feature film. But
Well, but
yeah,
you
I
know what?
totally get it.
But no, but that's actually a really important thing, right? What did you just say there? You just said I made 20 short films.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's 20 short films is what? Maybe four feature films? So
Yeah.
it's a different thing, right? Like that's the thing. I I'm not saying it's impossible to make a first feature, but I don't you don't count in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like a guy back in the day, a guy like Scorsese, his first film was a student film because they shot on film. It
Right.
wasn't you couldn't do that many films because you didn't have the
Yeah.
money. You know, a film took so much money, so much resources back then. Now we have digital cameras that you point it in a direction, and if you can expose it okay, it's going to look gorgeous. I mean, these cameras are absurd. So it's just a different world. I still maintain my thought process, which is I believe don't go into your if you're out there listening, and Rob, you're also not a young man. I think you'll agree with that.
Wait, what?
And what I mean by that is I don't mean to insult you. I'm 50. I mean, I'm not a young man either. I'm thinking when we're talking about this, I'm thinking in terms of 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, maybe 30. And you know, by the time you did El Chupacabra, I don't know how old you are, but your life experience and all the things you've gone through gave you the ability to understand how to maneuver human beings and direct them and lead people. You know, that's
Yeah.
what a feature film director is someone that understands how to lead people, how to get people to see a common vision and to execute that vision. If you're 20 or 25, you know, it's going to take time for you to understand and how to navigate all the responsibilities that comes into it. And there's going to be a kid out there that watches this and it's going to make it his goal to make me wrong, and I hope they are. I hope they
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
I hope they
Go
do.
for
And
it,
I
dude.
want you to tell me, Colin Bressler on Facebook, find me on Instagram, Eating Crab Studios, and
Yeah.
call me the hell out. And I want to watch your movie and be blown away. I love when people are excellent and do excellent things. But I will say this. Orson Welles made his first movie called Citizen Kane, which is arguably one of the greatest movies ever made. He was 25 years old. But it's interesting because his film was shot by Greg Toland. Greg Toland, you probably know, but people out there are going, "Who the hell is that?" Greg Toland is one of the greatest cinematographers in the history of cinema. So he held Orson's hand, which Orson would admit to later in interviews, and he guided him through the process in saying, "Orson, you're a great artist, you're a genius, but here's how cinema works." So even in that case, Orson Welles had a master working with him. I know for a fact this movie behind me and every movie I've done would always be improved with a better cinematographer than me. I shoot all my movies. I only do it because I'm a talented cinematographer. I've done it my whole life. I do it professionally. There's a lot better cinematographers out there. they would improve my films, without a doubt. I just can't afford them, like
Right.
in all reality. But and an editor too. Like I don't know who edited El Chupacabra. I don't know shot. You know what I mean? But I know it's a great film. I think that added to the process. These people add to the process, help create great art in cinema. I'm off my
Yeah.
soapbox, by the way.
No, no, I love it. I love it. I actually edited El
Oh, wow.
Chupacabra, and yeah,
Talented. You're a talented man.
thank you. I appreciate that. It is one of the most enjoyable pieces of the process of making a film for me. Like, I love to write, because I just like to take an idea, right, and bring it to life. Directing for me is kind of a functional thing. Like, I mean, I love it and I love being on set. But it's the most stressful part of the filmmaking process for me. But when I can finally, like I'm a kid in a candy store, when I can sit down in the editing booth with all of the footage that I've shot and start to piece, what to me is a puzzle, right? To bring to life the thing that I wrote. Like it's really, really
Yeah, and I
satisfying.
just
So
can I just add on to that really quick?
yeah,
No, I think you'll agree. Like to me, it's like when you're writing and it hits, right? There's this glorious like feeling in your body. You're like, oh, that's a good scene. That is a
yeah.
or even a dialogue. You're like, oh, that's a good
Mm,
that's a good line, right? Then on
yep.
set, it's so much less frequent, and I agree with you. It's filmmaking is horror. It's like it's so hard. It's so you're especially for Rob and I and other filmmakers when you're doing wearing a bunch of hats, you're like you're bright. You're just like ah. But even then, I'm sure you'll agree. There's those moments where you're watching a shot or you're in the scene and you see it and you're like, that's good. That's
Yeah.
really and then but I agree with you. Nothing comes close to editing when a scene works and it's finally come together and you're like because you see it as a movie for the first time. It's not a movie
Yep.
on the page. It's not even a movie on set because it's just this moment, a scene you just shot. But in editing, you're like, oh, I made a movie. Look, I made a movie. You know what I mean? I agree with you 1,000%. It's like I
Yeah.
I love editing. I love seeing it come together. I'm not a good editor and I'm not like I don't love the process because I'm too ADHD and like all over the place. But I
Yeah.
agree with you 1,000%. There's nothing better in the creative experience than when you see it come together in that edit room and you're like, I made a movie. I freaking made a movie.
Yep. Yeah. For sure. Hey, so I know that you are the founder of the San Antonio Horror Film Festival. Festival director, I guess, is probably the appropriate term. But yeah, tell me a little bit about why you decided to start that film festival and what it's all about.
So I don't know if you were a part of this. I'm sure you were. So we used to have the Horrific Film Festival. Um, it was done. I'm freaking forgetting his name right now, and I apologize if he sees this. But there was a gentleman who had a film festival called the Horrific Film Festival in San Antonio, and every year I went, and it was so freaking amazing. So great. I met so many other filmmakers. He took Bloody Drama, he took Domestic Hell. These are two films I made. Um, but it wasn't just that he took my films. It was just like it was so great. He had one room was screening, one room was like a setup of like film you could go buy cool horror stuff. Anyway, COVID destroyed that film festival, and it went
Mm,
away. And I was so depressed. I was so depressed to the point where I would message him on Facebook and be like, "What's going on, man? Are you gonna do your festival? No, no, it's over." He
mm,
got into music and other ventures, but so time went on and we got through COVID, thank God. And then it just bummed me out, and I was like, because I know that this city is a mecca for horror,
yeah, big
you know,
horror fan
amazing,
base for
yeah,
sure.
so big. And I was like, it's insane that this place doesn't have a horror film festival. Now it does. There's the Women's by Cynthia Bergen, the
Hmm.
Women's Horrific Film Festival, right? So she got me on that. She was faster than me and got that going. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
And go to it. I believe it's in September at the City Based Cinema. Please go and like sell it out every day. So she was doing that, and but at the time that she launched hers, I was already sort of like thinking I want to figure out a way to get this thing going. I never thought in a million years I would do a film festival. But my partner Marlon Minifee and we're partners in Fourth Quarter Productions and Bressler. It's the same company basically. We both talked about it, and I was like, I think we should do it, but he has so many contacts for a space, so we finally got it off the ground. It was very difficult. We got the first annual happened back in March, was
Yeah.
not ideal, did not go super well in terms of I got it. The space didn't really work, and I scrambled to get it together. There was a lot of problems, but in the end, it did happen. We did screen the films, we did give out awards. I bought really nice trophies because I know what it means to get a cool trophy as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Because the thing about it is to me is that this industry is so weighted towards money and fame, and filmmakers like us do in some ways get pushed under the rug, and I don't I it pisses me off, and I want to, at least in my little small nook of the world, I can create a place where filmmakers can get the love they deserve for doing quality films like you did with the Chupacabra, you know doing quality films and getting through what I call the bottleneck, because like basically there's so much indie film out there on Tubi
Hmm.
particularly, but what happens is there's so much, the audience don't know where to look, and it
Yeah.
gets down to a small bottleneck, and only a few movies get seen, and a lot of movies get overseen or not seen. And so I wanted to create a place that, at least in the mecca of horror filmmaking, which is San Antonio, I wanted to create a place that indie filmmakers, particularly from Texas, but anywhere in the world. We got films from Spain, England. Um, it was great. I mean, I had a blast, and this year we're doing it. We found an amazing screening facility at Blue Star in San Antonio.
Oh, cool.
The festival will be March 28th. Submissions are open. Please go submit to the San Antonio Horror Film Festival on Film Freeway,
Yeah.
and we're accepting films now. We just opened, and like I said, second annual is going to be a million times better. We're probably going to try to have a little bit of vendors this year selling some cool stuff, and it's just going to grow. I know that in 5 years it'll be huge, and it'll be a big time horror film festival that a lot of people will know about across the country. It's just going to take time to build it, and because I'm like all about, like, I really want to be someone who supports not just myself but other people like you're doing. I mean, you're doing exactly that by bringing me on, and you're going to bring all these other people on, and that's it. We have to uplift each other and find venues to help each other out.
Absolutely. Well, Colin, really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk about indie filmmaking.
This was awesome.
Um, where would you like the audience to go to catch your films, to stay connected with what you've got going on?
Yeah, I mean, if you have Tubi, please watch my stuff on there. You can literally just put my name, Colin Bressler, in the search bar. My films on there are Into the Gravel Pit, The Mummy Murders, which we talked about, Bloody Drama, and I have a drama on there called No Promised Land, all of which are Texas based movies. If you don't have Tubi, I recommend getting it because it is the mecca of independent film. But if you're refusing to do that, which is fine, I'm on Amazon Prime. Same thing. If you put me in the search bar, all my movies come up, and they're all there for streaming and for sale, DVDs, etc. Also on Instagram, I'm at Eating Crab Studios on Instagram, and I don't post there super much, but I mean, I'll post like updates and stuff. But yeah, the main thing is watch try to watch The Legend of El Chupacabra, watch indie films, go on these platforms and give them a chance. Just if the poster's cool, or in the case of El Chupacabra, if you're like, oh my God, I've heard of El Chupacabra, which I have in my life, go check it out. Like, go find these films because it's our lifeblood. It's the only way anybody hears about us. You know what I mean? So that's it. Yeah. I mean, that's where
All
I'm at.
right. Well, once again, Colin, appreciate you coming on. That is it for the Texas Indie Film Podcast. I'm Rob Mabry. Colin has done a great job of plugging El Chupacabra, so I won't do that except to remind everybody, if you're going to watch an indie film, watch it on Tubi. That's where filmmakers tend to make the most money. So that's it for today, and we will talk again soon. That's it for this week's episode of the Texas Indie Film Podcast. Don't forget to follow, like, and comment. And if you're a filmmaker from the Lone Star State and you'd like to be a guest on the show, contact Texas Indie Film on Facebook, Instagram, or email at texasindiefilm@gmail.com.